The fluorescent lights of room 304 hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, a sound Sarah had learned to ignore after 3 years teaching history at Oak Creek High. To anyone watching, she was just Miss Ryan, cardigans, coffee stains, and a soft voice that rarely rose above a murmur. But Sarah didn't just watch, she observed. And today, the state standardized assessment didn't feel right. The atmosphere was too heavy, the silence too brittle. In the third row, a sophomore named Leo tapped his pencil against the desk in a rhythmic, frantic Morse code. His eyes weren't on the test booklet, they were darting toward the door, where Vice Principal Holloway stood like a statue. Holloway was a man who wore suits that cost more than a teacher's yearly salary, a detail Sarah had noted and filed away months ago. He wasn't watching the room generally, he was watching Leo specifically. Sarah walked down the aisle, her movements silent. Her shoes were sensible rubber soles, but she walked with the rolling gait of someone trained to move without sound on gravel, let alone linoleum. She paused by Leo's desk. The boy was sweating, despite the aggressive air conditioning. On his Scantron sheet, the bubbles weren't filled in randomly. They formed a distinct, jagged pattern, a QR-like matrix that definitely wasn't part of the state curriculum. "Focus, Leo," Sarah whispered, her voice calm but commanding. Leo flinched. "I can't," he breathed, barely audible. "They said if I don't finish the sequence, my tuition waiver is gone." Sarah's eyes narrowed. Tuition waivers were administrative, not academic. Before she could press him, the bell rang. The sharp trill shattered the tension. Immediately, Holloway moved. He didn't wait for the students to stack their papers. He marched straight for Leo, snatching the test sheet from the boy's trembling hands. "I'll take that," Holloway said, his smile failing to reach his cold eyes. "Processing needs to be immediate this year. New district policy." Sarah intercepted him. It was a fluid motion, stepping into his path just as he turned. "Protocol, Mr. Holloway," she said, her voice pleasant but her body blocking his exit. "Teachers must seal the exams in the tamper-proof bag before administration touches them. State law." Holloway stared at her, his jaw tightening. For a second, the mask slipped, revealing pure, unadulterated malice. "You're a stickler, Sarah. Be careful. Strict teachers often find themselves transferred to the basement archives." He stepped around her, but in that split second of proximity, Sarah's hand had brushed the stack. She hadn't taken the sheet, but she had seen the header code Leo had written at the top. It wasn't a student ID. It was a routing number for an offshore account. As Holloway left, Sarah looked out the window. A black sedan was idling by the football field, waiting. This wasn't a school exam. It was a transaction. The teacher's lounge was empty, smelling of burnt popcorn and stale ambition. Sarah sat in the corner, her laptop open, but she wasn't grading papers. She was accessing the district server. To the IT department, her login would look like a standard request for history syllabi, but underneath the interface, she was running a tracer program she hadn't used since her life before Oak Creek. The code Leo had written, the offshore routing number, was her key. She typed rapidly, her eyes scanning the scrolling data. The state assessment files weren't linked to the Department of Education. They were rerouting through a shell server hosted in the Cayman Islands. Sarah felt that familiar coldness settle in her chest, the tactical detachment that allowed her to function in high-stakes environments. Oak Creek High wasn't just failing students, it was selling them. "You're working late?" Sarah didn't jump. She slowly closed her laptop and turned. Mr. Henderson, the guidance counselor, stood in the doorway. He was a nervous man, always fidgeting with his tie, but tonight he looked surprisingly composed, too composed. "Just catching up on the Civil War," Sarah lied smoothly, her heart rate remaining resting state steady. "History tends to repeat itself if you don't pay attention." Henderson walked to the coffee pot, his back to her. "It does, like the history of teachers who ask too many questions about the testing budget. They tend to have accidents, employment gaps." He turned, holding a steaming mug. "Leo is a bright kid, Sarah, but bright kids are commodities here. The exams identify the ones with specific aptitudes, mathematical, cryptographic, psychological. We don't just grade them, we place them. Corporate scholarships, they call it. I call it indentured servitude." "You're admitting this to me?" Sarah asked, her hand drifting toward the heavy metal stapler on the desk. It wasn't a weapon, but in her hands it could be. "I'm warning you," Henderson said, his voice dropping. "Holloway isn't the top of the food chain. He's just the enforcer. You saw the car outside? That's the client. They're looking for a specific data set today, and you delayed the transfer when you stopped Holloway." Sarah stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "I'm just a history teacher, Bob. I don't know anything about clients." "Good," Henderson said, sipping his coffee. "Keep it that way. Because I just saw the security logs. Someone used your ID to access the restricted basement elevator 5 minutes ago. You're being framed, Sarah, and security is already on the way up." The PA system crackled to life. "Miss Ryan to the principal's office, immediately. Miss Ryan to the principal's office." Sarah looked out the vent above the refrigerator. Old habits kicked in. She wasn't going to the office. She was going hunting.
The hallways of Oak Creek High were designed for surveillance. Cameras sat like vulture eyes at every intersection, their red LEDs blinking in the dim after-hours lighting. Sarah knew the blind spots. She had mapped them during her first week, a reflex from a decade of evading people with much bigger guns than a school security guard. She moved quickly, hugging the wall, slipping past the custodial closet just as heavy boots echoed around the corner. It was Gus, the head of campus security, a former military contractor who had been dishonorably discharged. Sarah had pulled his file the day he was hired. He wasn't here to escort her to a meeting. He was carrying a stun baton, and he wasn't alone. 2 other guards, men she didn't recognize, flanked him. "Check the classrooms," Gus barked. "Holloway wants her found before the shift change. She has the digital key on her laptop." Sarah slipped into the library, locking the door silently behind her. She didn't have a digital key, which meant they thought she had downloaded the evidence. That gave her leverage, but it also put a target on her back. She needed to find Leo. If Henderson was right, the exam was an aptitude test for something illegal, and Leo was the prize pony. She pulled out a burner phone, a flip phone she kept taped under a drawer in her desk, and dialed a number that hadn't existed for 5 years. It rang once, then clicked. "ASAP status?" a distorted voice asked. "Active," Sarah whispered, crouching behind the reference section. "I need a trace on a student's phone. Leo Vance, Oak Creek High." "You're supposed to be retired, Sarah. We scrubbed your file for a reason." "The school is a front. They're using standardized testing to profile minors for something. High-level encryption, offshore accounts. I need to know where Leo is." A pause. The sound of rapid typing. "His phone is pinging. He's not in the building. He's at the rail yard, 3 miles east." But Sarah, the data packet he was uploading during the test, it wasn't answers, it was a virus. He wasn't taking the test, he was hacking their network from the inside. Sarah froze. Leo wasn't a victim, he was a saboteur. Suddenly, the library glass shattered. A flashlight beam swept over the books. "She's in here," Gus yelled. Sarah didn't hide. She grabbed a heavy hardcover encyclopedia, feeling the weight in her hand. The quiet history teacher persona evaporated. She vaulted over the circulation desk, sliding into the shadows of the stacks. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them a lesson. The rail yard was a graveyard of rusted metal and forgotten logistics, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of Oak Creek High. Sarah parked her sedan 2 blocks away and moved on foot, using the shadows of the shipping containers for cover. The field trip was a euphemism Holloway used for off-site meetings, and now she knew why. It was isolated, loud, and perfect for disappearing people. Sarah spotted Leo near a blue container, shivering in his varsity jacket. He wasn't alone. Holloway was there, pacing back and forth, shouting into a phone. 2 of the hired security goons stood by a black SUV, smoking. Sarah crept closer, closing the distance with the silence of a predator. She needed to hear them. "The upload was corrupted, you stupid kid," Holloway screamed, grabbing Leo by the collar. "The client is furious. That algorithm was worth 10 million. "I did what you said," Leo stammered, his voice cracking. "I filled in the bubbles. Maybe the Scantron machine is broken." Sarah watched Leo's face. The fear looked real, but her contact had said Leo uploaded a virus. The kid was acting. He was playing Holloway. Leo had sabotaged the deal. But why? To steal the money for himself or to destroy the operation? Holloway threw Leo to the ground. Put him in the car. We're taking him to the secondary location. The principal will deal with this personally. Sarah scanned the environment. 2 guards, 1 Holloway, 1 student. She had no weapon, just a tire iron she'd slipped into her sleeve from her trunk. She had to disable the vehicle before they left. She picked up a rusted bolt and threw it hard against a sheet of corrugated metal 50 feet away. The clang was deafening. The guards spun around, hands reaching for holsters. Holloway froze. "Check it out," Holloway hissed. 1 guard moved away. Odds improved. Sarah moved. She didn't run, she sprinted low. She reached the SUV just as the remaining guard turned back. He didn't even have time to shout. She struck him in the solar plexus with the tire iron, knocking the wind out of him, then swept his legs. He hit the gravel hard. Holloway spun around, eyes widening in shock. "Miss Ryan?" "Class is in session," Sarah said coldly. She grabbed Leo, yanking him up. "Run, now." Leo stared at her, stunned by the sudden violence from their history teacher. "Miss Ryan, you just—" "I said run." But they were too late. A spotlight from above blinded them. A drone hovered overhead, its goaters buzzing angrily. The PA system from the drone crackled. "Stand down, Agent 419. We know who you are." Sarah's blood ran cold. They didn't just know she was a teacher, they knew her old code name. The corruption went deeper than the school district. It went back to her past.
They were pinned down behind a stack of railway ties. The drone hovered above, a mechanical eye tracking their heat signatures. Leo was hyperventilating, clutching his backpack to his chest. "Agent 409?" Leo whispered, looking at Sarah with wide, terrified eyes. "You're a spy?" "History teacher," Sarah corrected, scanning the perimeter. "And right now, I'm your only chance of graduating alive. Why did you plant the virus, Leo? Talk." Leo swallowed hard. "I found the files on the shared drive. They aren't just selling our data, they're selling us. The high scorers, we don't get scholarships. We get recruited. Private military, cyber warfare, black ops. They groom us. I wanted to destroy their database so they couldn't track us anymore." Sarah peered over the edge. The guards were regrouping, waiting for backup. Leo's intentions were noble but reckless. He had kicked a hornet's nest. "The drone is relaying our position," Sarah said. "We need to move." "Where?" "Back to school," Sarah said grimly. "That's where the server is. The virus you planted is just a dormant shell unless we activate the root access. We have to finish what you started." "Are you crazy? Holloway is there." "Holloway is here," Sarah pointed to the shouting man near the SUV. "The school is empty, except for the principal." They moved as the drone swept left. Sarah guided Leo through a drainage pipe, moving through the muck without hesitation. She was calculating variables. If they knew her code name, it meant someone from her old agency was selling her out. The corruption wasn't just local greed, it was a federal leak. They reached her car. Sarah hotwired the ignition to bypass the GPS tracker she knew they would have activated on her keys. As they sped back toward the high school, Leo opened his laptop. "I can bypass the external locks," Leo said, his fingers flying across the keys. "But the server room in the basement has a biometric scanner, Principal Vance's retina." "I know," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on the road. "Vance is the key. We're not breaking in, Leo. We're going to knock." She drifted the car around the corner, killing the headlights as the dark silhouette of the school loomed ahead. It looked innocent, a brick fortress of education, but Sarah knew better. It was a training ground for the next generation of weapons. "Stay close," Sarah ordered, checking the tire iron in her grip. "And if I tell you to look away, you look away. I don't want you traumatized before prom." The school at night was a tomb. The silence was absolute, amplified by the rhythmic thud of their sneakers on the polished hallway tiles. Sarah led Leo toward the administrative wing, moving with a predator's grace. She stopped at the corner, holding up a hand. Principal Vance's office door was ajar. A sliver of light spilled out onto the floor. "He's expecting us," Sarah whispered. "How?" Leo asked, his voice trembling. "Because he's arrogant," Sarah replied. "He thinks he's the smartest man in the room. Men like that always leave the door open. They want an audience for their victory speech." She pushed the door open. Principal Vance sat behind his mahogany desk, casually signing paperwork. He didn't look up. "Miss Ryan, Leo, please have a seat. You're just in time for the expulsion hearings." Vance was an older man, distinguished, with silver hair and a grandfatherly demeanor that masked a sociopathic lack of empathy. He placed his pen down and looked at Sarah. "I must say, Sarah, or should I call you Commander, I'm impressed. You managed to disable 3 of my best security contractors with a piece of scrap metal. Your performance review is going to be stellar." "Cut the act, Vance," Sarah said, stepping into the room. She positioned herself between Vance and Leo. "We know about the recruitment program, the fake exams, the offshore accounts." Vance chuckled. "Recruitment? You make it sound so sinister. We're identifying potential. Genius needs direction. We provide it. And you, of all people, should understand the need for capable soldiers." "I'm not a soldier anymore," Sarah said. "I'm a teacher." "Are you?" Vance pressed a button on his desk. A heavy steel shutter slammed down over the office window. The door clicked, locking automatically. "The virus Leo planted didn't destroy the data. It encrypted it. He held it for ransom. Isn't that right, Leo?" Sarah turned to look at the student. Leo wasn't trembling anymore. He was smiling, a cold, calculating smirk that didn't belong on a teenager's face. "I wanted a better cut," Leo shrugged. 10% was an insult. Sarah realized the mistake instantly. She had not rescued a victim. She had escorted a partner back to the negotiating table. The betrayal stung, sharp and deep. "Good work bringing him back, Miss Ryan," Vance said, opening a drawer. He pulled out a suppressed pistol. "But I'm afraid your contract has been terminated." 3 days later, the news cycle was dominating the TVs in the airport terminal. "Massive corruption scandal at Oak Creek High," the headline screamed. "Principal and student linked to international cyber espionage ring." Sarah sat at the gate, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. She watched the screen. The FBI had raided the school the morning after the fire. They found the basement server room, the fake diplomas, the weapon caches. But they didn't find Vance or Leo. The official report said they were fugitives at large. Sarah knew better. She checked her tablet. The tracker she had planted was pinging from a private airfield in Nevada. They were trying to leave the country. She wasn't going to let that happen, but she couldn't do it as a teacher. Sarah Ryan, the quiet history teacher, had to die so that Agent 409 could work. She typed a resignation email on her phone. "Dear Superintendent, due to personal reasons, I will not be returning for the fall semester. Please find attached my final grades." She hit send. A man in a gray suit sat down next to her. He didn't look at her, staring straight ahead at the tarmac. "You made quite a mess, Sarah," the man said quietly. It was her old handler from the agency. "I cleaned up your mess, Miller," she replied, not turning. "You let that school operate for 5 years. Were you getting a cut?" "It was a honeypot," Miller sighed. "We were monitoring it, gathering intel on who was buying the data. You blew the operation." "They were selling kids, Miller. I don't care about your operation." Miller slid a manila envelope across the seat between them. "Vance is being intercepted in Nevada as we speak. We're picking him up. But the boy, Leo, he disappeared. We can't find him." Sarah took the envelope. "Leo is smarter than Vance. He probably anticipated the raid." "We need you to bring him in, Sarah. You know how he thinks. He trusts you." "He tried to kill me." "He's 16. He's scared. And he has the decryption keys for the rest of the network. If he sells those, this starts all over again somewhere else." Sarah looked at the departure board. Her flight was to Nevada. She stood up. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I hate leaving a lesson unfinished." She walked toward the jetway. The quiet teacher was gone. The hunter was back. The Nevada sun was blinding. Sarah stood outside a roadside diner, the heat radiating off the asphalt. The tracker led here. It was the middle of nowhere, a perfect place for a ghost to vanish. She entered the diner. It was empty except for a figure in the back booth, hunched over a laptop. Leo. He looked up as she approached. He looked tired, his varsity jacket dusty. He didn't run, he just closed the laptop. "I knew you'd come," Leo said. He pushed a coffee cup toward the empty seat opposite him. "You're persistent, it's your best trait as a teacher." Sarah sat down. "It's over, Leo. Vance is in custody. The feds are scrubbing the network. Give me the keys." Leo smiled, but it wasn't the arrogant smirk from Vance's office. It was sadder. "Vance was a middleman, Miss Ryan. You know that. He was just the administrator. I wasn't working for him. I was working above him." Sarah froze. "What are you talking about?" "The recruitment program," he said, softly. "It wasn't for mercenaries. It was for correction. The algorithm identifies potential threats to the state before they happen. Future terrorists, insurgents, radicals. We don't recruit them to hire them, we recruit them to neutralize them." He slid the laptop toward her. "I wasn't selling the data for money, I was deleting the kill list. My name was on it, so was yours." Sarah opened the laptop. The screen showed a list of profiles, high-risk individuals. Her file was there. Sarah Ryan, status compromised, action terminate. "Vance was told to kill you weeks ago," Leo explained. "He delayed it because he thought he could use you. I played along to buy time. I planted the virus to wipe the target list, not to steal money." Sarah looked at the boy. He wasn't a villain, he was a survivor, just like her. He had played the villain to save them both. "The feds are coming, Leo," Sarah said. "Miller wants you." "Miller is the one who makes the list," Leo said. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her handler, the agency. The corruption wasn't a rogue school, it was the system itself. Sarah closed the laptop. She stood up and looked out the window. A black sedan was approaching in the distance. Miller. "Go out the back," Sarah said. "Take the dirt bike parked by the dumpster. Head north to the canyon. Lose the signal." "What about you?" Leo asked as he stood up. Sarah turned to him, her face calm, the mask of the quiet teacher slipping back into place. "I have a meeting with the administration," she said. "I need to discuss my performance review." Leo nodded, grabbed his bag, and ran. Sarah watched him go, then turned to the door as the black sedan pulled up. She adjusted her cardigan, checked the hidden blade in her sleeve, and waited. The exam was over, but the class was just beginning.